Hi there, Mason Nation, and welcome to this week's episode of Touch Base, where we'll be delivering to you everything you need to know about everything there is to know about baseball. Today, and for the future production of Touch Base, we'll be joined by our new co-producer and co-host.
Hi everybody, my name is Ryan Donohoe. I am a sophomore accounting student here at George Mason, and I'm glad to be here at Touch Base. I've been a baseball fan all of my life, most especially because since the Nationals relocated here to DC in 2005, that's really what sparked my interest, and I think I can provide a good amount of baseball knowledge to the Touch Base family, so good to be here.
Awesome, and we're happy to be joined by Ryan. And as per usual, I'm your host, Aaron Witten. And today we'll really be hitting on the World Series, some regular season awards that are be given out soon, and the brand new opening of the hot stove season. So let's dive right into it.
All right, well, big news in baseball the past couple weeks was obviously the World Series. The Cubs, Chicago Cubs won, beat the Indians in 7 games, and won their first World Series championship in 108 years. That's why everybody had been talking about the Chicago Cubs curse and things that had been going on, and they finally broke that. Since 1908 was the last time they had won. And the Indians actually had a 3-1 lead over the Chicago Cubs going into Game 5, but the Cubs were able to rally. They won Games 5, 6, and 7, and they also actually in a thrilling Game 7. It was I know we'd been talking about one of the better games we had ever seen. They won in extra innings off of a few key hits by the Cubs and some timely pitching. I know the Cubs, Aroldis Chapman gave up a few runs in the 8th and 9th there, but they were able to rally and eventually win the game. And Chicago was ecstatic, and the Cubs were ecstatic, as they should be, and we'll see who can do it again next year.
It was really a historic comeback by the Cubs. Definitely. I can't really tell if it was more of a meltdown on the Indians' part or of a historic comeback by the Cubs. Their rotation has really solidified their team for the whole year to go along with one of the best offenses in the majors. They had Jake Arrieta. They had Kyle Hendricks, who's in contention for the NL Cy Young. John Lester. John Lester came in and pitched two or 3 innings in the last game. He gave up a run. And as you said, Chapman, the guy they acquired from the Yankees for a couple top prospects, Gleyber Torres, a shortstop prospect, really headlined that deal. And Chapman, actually, his average velocity this year on his fastball was 108.38 miles per hour. It was the hardest he'd thrown in a single season yet. So they were really helped by that, and the Cubs they really hit it off.
Definitely. But on the reverse side of that, the Indians pitching actually, especially at least in Game 7, really they were not able to rely on it unlike they had in previous games. Corey Kluber and Andrew Miller specifically had given up more runs in Game 7 than they had in the entire postseason combined. So they weren't able to step up to the plate, but it's okay. I'm sure that they're looking forward to be able to get back at it next year.
And Kluber came into that Game 7 with an ERA for the postseason under 1, and it went up to 1.83 after he pitched that game. He pitched 4 innings. He gave up 4 runs. He'd given up 7 earned runs the entire postseason, so he gave up more than half of his earned runs that game, as well as Andrew Miller. He gave up 2 runs in that game as well. And I don't know if it was the heat of the moment, but they just really were not able to secure that. And like you said, they were able to come back and tie it in the 9th inning, and it was really an intriguing game. And maybe if it hadn't been for the rain delay,
you never know. You never know. There's a lot of talk about how the Cubs were able to rally together in the locker room behind Jason Hayward and other people who got up and spoke and inspired the Chicago Cubs to come back. But you never know. Yeah, maybe if they didn't have that rain delay, the Indians could have rallied themselves and won it. But I guess that's for another day.
It'll be interesting to see where both of these teams are in the midst of the season next year. So we'll be moving on to the postseason, and we'll be talking about the qualifying offer system and exactly how it is approached by teams and players. So the free agency period commences 12 days after the World Series. The first 5 days after the World Series, teams are able to offer qualifying offers to eligible free agents that have at least 6 years of service time. And to go along with that, after the 5 days, if they are extended qualifying offers, the players then have 7 days to either accept or decline the qualifying offer. If they do accept the qualifying offer, they are, there's a compensation pick that's attached to them throughout the postseason. And any team that does not have a top 10 pick in the Rule 4 amateur draft come June has to forfeit their first round pick for the player that they sign that has draft pick compensation attached to them. So that's pretty much how the qualifying offer system works. And this winter, there's going to be a new collective bargaining agreement that's going to be agreed upon between Major League Baseball and the Players Union. So we'll really see how that is going to work out to be.
Now, for so as you said, going into the off season, you've got a lot of free agency and big names out there this year, definitely. Starting with Yoenis Cespedes, playing for the New York Mets last year. He's opted out of his contract or his final year, and he has decided to test the market. And we're thinking it's probably a good idea. He should get some good money. They were talking about the Mets maybe re-signing, but I think maybe they were saying the Dodgers and the Giants were other big contenders in that. After having a big year with over 30 home runs and over 80 RBIs, he should be looking for a long-term deal, and I think he hopes he can get that.
And I think going off your point of having a stellar year, it's a no-brainer that he's opting out of the. I think he has 2 years, $47 million left on his contract, and he can definitely maximize that more. By going to the free agent market. Next up on the list is Edwin Encarnacion, the Toronto Blue Jay, who hit 42 home runs this year. He also had a career high 127 RBIs. The guy just mashes at Rogers Center. I don't know if it's Rogers Center or maybe being in a lineup with Devin Travis and Michael Saunders and Jose Bautista, but he's been really good ever since he was acquired from the Cincinnati Reds. I feel like he's going to get a huge contract this offseason.
I mean, based off of his last year's production, he seems to deserve it. I think the teams that'll be going after him will definitely want him to continue that. And they're thinking maybe, I don't know about how his defense or how that will play out or whether or not he does try and settle down into more of a DH role, but I guess that's another thing that we'll have to see.
Do you think that limits him only to American League teams, his defensive versatility?
I would definitely say that he would be able to get more money, I would think, in an American League team, to where if he's in a defensive slump, that kind of thing, they know that his value is in his bat and that he can, at the very least, be put into the lineup in the DH position and at least still succeed in that end. So, yes, I would say that he's probably going to sign with an American League team just based on the worst case scenario to where they have to put him at DH. They at least would still be able to use him. So, yeah. And then next on the list, as we talked about, was Aroldis Chapman. He's been around a little bit recently. He started out his career with the Reds and then was signed to the Yankees, and then this past season at the trade deadline was traded to the Chicago Cubs, helped them win their World Series, and now they're talking about maybe he will re-sign with the Yankees, which would be a little bit of a flip-flop, but definitely would be a good fit for the Yankees. He pitched well all year, obviously throws very hard. All the top 10 hardest pitches ever thrown in Major League Baseball all belong to him, and he can definitely bring that electricity out and from the closing role. So I think that the Yankees he would be good for, maybe the Cubs as well as they were talking, or even the Giants, who, as we saw this year, had a very struggling bullpen, to say the least, that helped them to. Yeah, their season looked bright at the beginning of the first half of the year, but as their bullpen diminished, they got worse. So
yeah,
we'll
and
see
the
how that
Giants,
goes.
they have Sergio Romo and Santiago Casilla. They're both losing those to free agency. And then they have Derek Law currently installed as their closer. And I think Chapman would be a really good addition to the Yankees, considering they traded him. And if they get him back, they got the prospects and they're getting Chapman back. And the guy was outstanding when he was with the Cubs. He had a 1.01 ERA over the 20-some-odd innings he pitched with the Cubs. So to say he was good is really an understatement.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
So next up on the list, we have another flame-throwing relief pitcher, Kenley Jansen, a former minor league catcher turned relief pitcher, which is an interesting story. He had a 1.83 ERA this entire year with the Dodgers. For his career, he has a cumulative 2.5. His ERA is under 2.5, and he's got a nice cutter, and he throws hard, and I feel like he'd suit a lot of really good National League teams.
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of the comparisons to Mariano Rivera, obviously, with that cutter, the natural cutter, as they say. He just developed it over time. And if you're from this area, if you're any sort of Nationals fan, you saw a lot of Kenley Jansen in the NLDS coming in sometimes the 7th inning, in the 8th inning a couple times, and he was able to pitch over 50 pitches in some innings, and he showed a lot of versatility there to where he can do more than just that 9th inning role. He can come in for a 4-out save occasionally if you need it, and he's a young guy, and I definitely think that he will be a good acquisition for whoever is able to land him. And so next we go to another Dodger, Justin Turner. He had a good year last year, another player who's had one of their best career years, 27 home runs and 90 RBIs. Also, which WAR is one of the bigger sabermetrics out there, which he was able to contribute 5 wins above replacement for the Dodgers this past year. So any team that's looking to land him, they're talking about maybe the Giants or the Braves. The Giants are in on a lot of these deals. They're trying to spend some money, I think. And anywhere that he can land, I think that he can produce offensively. And he showed, I think, improvements on his defense this year, as year.
Oh yeah, his bat is unheralded, and I think his defense is just as good. For those who don't know what WAR is, as Ryan said, it's wins above replacement, a sabermetric stat. And because he was worth 5 wins above replacement, according to Fangraphs, that was about $40 million worth of worth if each WAR is accounted for $8 million. So he was really good for the Dodgers this year, and he's going to really be looking for that long-term contract.
Definitely.
So Mark Trumbo, a Baltimore Oriole who played right field and DH, is a free agent this year after being acquired from the Seattle Mariners. He had a league-leading 47 home runs. I feel like the guy's always hitting home runs every year.
Yeah, he just hits them.
But he had 170 strikeouts to go with that. Where do you think he's going to land?
I would like to see him, and I think that he would fit best again with the Orioles, and I wouldn't be surprised if I saw that. I think he had a good spot in the lineup there in between when he was hitting after Adam Jones and things like that, to where he actually was seeing pitches, he was hitting with runners on base, and also they had some outfield versatility to where they didn't have to throw him out there every night, and he was able to DH every night with people like Chris Bryant on their team, or not Chris Bryant, excuse me, their first baseman Chris Davis. People would think that maybe he would be the DH a lot, but he's actually an outstanding first baseman as well. So they're able to put him in the lineup, and Mark Trumbo and things can be DH when they need him to.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then following that would be Ian Desmond, another big free agent, former national from around here. He went to the Texas Rangers this past year and put up a good year. He was unable to sign a long-term deal after his 2015 season, excuse me, that was not on par with his 2014 season. But this past year, he was able to hit .282 with 22 home runs, which is very respectable. He also was able to have over 20 stolen bases, and he played very good center field for the Texas Rangers. His first year playing in the outfield, he'd played shortstop his entire life, and he was able to adapt and made a few big plays. And I think that teams now see, I wouldn't be surprised if he came back over to the National League, because teams know he can play defensively, but I also could see him staying in the American League due to the fact that he was able to hit, and sometimes you can get those guys that are kind of in-betweeners in positions, and like I said, you can have that cushion of having the DH, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has a long-term deal somewhere in the outfield, whether it be American League or National League. They're talking a lot about him potentially going to the Braves or the Angels or back to the Rangers, and all of those teams I think would be good fit. So I hope that he gets the deal that he deserves, because he did have a good year.
I think he'd be most valuable if he went back to his old days and he was playing shortstop.
Yes,
he was
agree.
okay defensively at shortstop. He's really, obviously, as you know, as a Nationals fan, really well known for his bat. He usually lives in the low 300s. I think he had a 335 on base percentage this year. So his OBP is usually low, but he makes up for that with a decent spike in batting average on base and balls, and his slugging percentage, especially with the 22 home runs. And as well, he was a 20-20 player this year, which is actually pretty good as well, to go along with, as you said, the good defense and center field for the Rangers. So he was really an offensive catalyst for the Rangers, who are usually known as a pretty good offensive team.
Yeah, definitely.
Next, we'll go on to one of the more prominent starting pitchers on this year's market, Rich Hill, who was acquired by the Dodgers at the non-waiver trade deadline in July from the Athletics. The guy was just, ever since the Red Sox picked him up last year, he's just been really a story. He had a 2.12 ERA over the life of this entire year. He's striking out over 1 batter per 1 inning, or 9 batters per 9 innings. He went 12-5 this year, and I feel like when he came over to the Dodgers, his control was impeccable. He wasn't giving up hits. He's got his huge curveball, and he doesn't throw hard. Like today's pitchers, all of them are throwing hard, and this guy's really crafty.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing about him is was really a late bloomer. He was a big prospect coming out, and there are different problems he had when he was a younger player, and to where he just couldn't put up the numbers that people thought that he was going to do. And now, though we've seen, as you said, since he was with the Red Sox, he's been turned around, and he's putting up really good numbers, like you said, with the Dodgers, and low 2s and things like that in the ERAs. So that can create value for any team, definitely, and a veteran presence in the locker room as well. So next would be Jose Bautista, Joey Bats. So we'll see where he could end up with another productive year with 22 home runs and 87 walks, which was a plus for him. Obviously, with a bat in your lineup like that, you need him to be able to get on base and not just either hit a home run or strike out. So if you're able to walk and have good plate vision and control, then that would be a plus for any team. I think that he will definitely stay in the American League. I know that some were saying about the Mets, you never know. He does play a good right field, but I think that he has a level of comfort with the Blue Jays. I wouldn't be surprised if he re-signs with them, but also some have talked about him going to the Red Sox and things like that. Maybe he'll try that tricky right field at Fenway Park, but we'll see what he can do. He's a talented guy. He's a veteran. He's got strong tools, strong arm, good bat, so he would be a good acquisition for any team.
And being 36 years old, he's on the latter part of his career. It's no doubt that he still has the power there. The walks there, he's got the plate discipline, the eye. His batting average was down this year. He was hitting in the 230s, but the guy still brings power and patience to any lineup that he's going to be in. His OPS plus, which it shows how much better he was than league average. He was 17% better than league average. So even though he had a down year according to his standards, he was still a lot better than league average.
Definitely.
And lastly, we'll be going on to Wilson Ramos, catcher of the Washington Nationals, your Washington Nationals.
Yes,
he suffered a torn ACL, so it is questionable how long he's going to be out for and what kind of contract he's going to get. I know we were talking about years and whatnot. What kind of contract do you think he's going to get, Ryan?
I'm thinking that he will not get as long as a contract as he would like. I love the guy. I think he was a great National, and you really couldn't get injured at a worse time than he did. Going into the playoffs, the Nationals were hot. He was coming off a career year, hitting over 300, over 20 home runs at the catching position. And unfortunately, in the last week or two of the season, he tore his ACL, his second ACL tear as a professional, and I think that's really going to hurt him. I think teams will definitely want to take a chance on him because they know obviously what he can do, and he's still a relatively young guy. But I think that as a catcher with 2 ACL injuries, it's got to leave you a little weary to sign a guy like that on your knees a lot. But we'll see. Maybe he can go over to an American League team or develop a new position. But he is a good catcher, and I think that he can do that as long as he has the proper rehab time and nobody rushes him back. I wouldn't like to see him sign a long-term deal with the pressure of getting back as soon as possible, just to inevitably hurt himself again.
I mean, the guy hit 307 on the year with 22 home runs, and considering that catcher's defensive position, I think those numbers speak for themselves
definitely.
and the talent that he does possess for the future.
Yeah, and a first All-Star he had this year, first All-Star game, and I know he was really happy about that. All right, well, that is the end of our segment. I'm glad you all were able to tune in. I want to thank you all for watching Touch Base, and I hope to see you all next week, and good night.
Good night.